I want to show you a very, very delicious video of Vivek Ramaswamy turning the cards on the reporters. He flips the script and starts to ask them the questions.
Just by show of hands, who here is willing to admit that the Trump-Russia collusion hoax was indeed incorrectly reported by the mainstream media? Is there anybody here able to admit that that was incorrect reporting? Why not? Why would that be inappropriate? I think it would be inappropriate. What's inappropriate is lying to the public.
We're doing our job asking you. The public lied to, or did the media report on this set of facts that were provided?
So that's a fair question. I actually think that the public was lied to long after the media systematically still understood that this was the product of the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier was a piece of Russian disinformation provided by the Hillary Clinton campaign that was served up to the federal government as a basis for issuing a FISA warrant to then potentially infiltrate a member of the opposition party. If this was Bush and Cheney doing it to John Kerry, this would have been the stuff of scandal, impeachment, and worse. And yet, I think it was an intentional lie that the media said that account, which we now know to be true, was actually the Russian disinformation. Now, Shauna, I would be charitable in my interpretation of that if it were just one instance. Let me give an easier one. Just by show of hands, does anybody believe the media's reporting about the origin of COVID-19 ran flatly in face of the facts that you have a Wuhan Institute of Virology that was now the likely origin of the COVID-19 pandemic? You all said that it wasn't for a long time. By show of hands, was the Wuhan lab the likely origin of the COVID-19 pandemic? Everybody, media or not. So you have reported, the same media that has reported that the COVID-19 pandemic did not originate in a lab in Wuhan is willing to even say, unwilling to admit today.
Came out in 2023, so I guess
it was known that there was a Wuhan Institute of Virology where they were conducting gain-of-function research, the very city which was the origin of a global pandemic. And yet the media's explanation was that somehow it could have been any source other than actually having started in a lab. I just think that that's systematically unacceptable. The Hunter Biden laptop. Is the Hunter Biden laptop story, as reported by the New York Post, which was shut down, had the Twitter account locked for anybody who is even sharing the story of the Hunter Biden laptop found on the eve of the last election? The media reported that it was Russian disinformation on the eve of that election. Does anyone here agree that the Hunter Biden laptop story, as reported by the New York Post, was indeed accurately reported and was not Russian disinformation, but was in fact a factually owned laptop of Hunter Biden? I mean, you got to, man. I mean, your paper reported it. Does everybody else seriously not believe that?
I mean, I believe that Hunter Biden is suing Rudy Giuliani over the laptop, so I don't think that's...
So you don't believe, so you think that it actually was the product of Russian disinformation, as was reported by the media, that was the basis for suppressing this at the time?
Cover the Hunter Biden case.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why we're talking about that.
Because it was election interference on the eve of the last election. And I think there's the same kind of election interference happening this time around. And I think it's happening, the early waves of it, with respect to the treatment of my candidacy. And I think that that is likely to be a major problem heading into the next year unless we're able to openly and transparently acknowledge the mistakes of the past. Without acknowledging the mistakes of the past, I think we are destined for an even more dangerous future. And I do not want to see a repeat of what happened in the 12 to 15 months leading up to January of 2021. I don't want to see that in this country. And I worry we're on a path to far worse than that until we have accountability 360 degrees for the mistakes that were made in that lead up. And the Hunter Biden laptop story and its suppression, Shauna, I do believe was a key part of the lead up to that. I think the suppression of the origin of COVID and the origin of the pandemic was a key part of the lead up to what happened in January of 2021. I think that the systematic suppression of speech in this country, even about debating the lockdowns, was a key part of what culminated in January 6, 2021. And as somebody who's looking to lead this country and hopefully, dare I say, reunite this country, I think it is critical, it is vital to the future of this country that we not repeat those same mistakes, and yet that's exactly what I'm seeing play out in slow motion, hiding in plain sight. And so it's my concern for this country that leads me to run for U.S. president. it's my concern for this country that causes me to raise what aren't some ancient issues to be swept under the rug. I think that history is relevant to what's happening today. And I will say, you ask thoughtful questions. You ask challenging questions, you ask thoughtful questions from time to time. I appreciate that. But I'm not, this is not some sort of contentious gotcha in reverse. I just think somebody in the media, like very soon, needs to stand up and do what I have suggested, which is to look your audience in the eye, any one network, to say, here's where we got it wrong last time. We're sorry about that. Here are the steps we're taking to make sure it doesn't happen again in this election. And I think that that will improve the integrity of this election, and I think it will improve the, frankly, future safety of our institutions over the course of the next 12 to 16 months, which I am deeply worried about in this country. I'm worried about it. As an American, I'm worried about it as a candidate. I think we're skating on thin ice, and I think we have limited time to shore up the actual support for this country that we're working with. And so that's why I'm saying what I am. Thank you for the extra time. We'll see you guys. Thank you.
How delicious was that? None of these reporters can answer honestly. In my opinion, is one of two reasons. One, most likely, they fear losing their jobs. Being caught on camera admitting that you work for a deceptive industry, that your bosses were intentionally deceptive, is definitely potentially grounds for termination. And they want to hold on to their pensions and their flow of funds. So why bother? The other thing is, once you have committed a nefarious act and you keep going down that road and somebody points out that your actions are harming people, you find a way to excuse it. Intellectually, you're able to turn that over in your mind and find a reason for it. Oh no, they're in court. We can't comment on that. Whatever it takes to avoid answering the question. But I just love how Vivek is able to do this, and so cogently, without a misstep, knowing all his facts. This man's intelligence is so much higher than any other candidates. It's higher than mine. I'm a reasonably intelligent guy. But man, I am so impressed by him. And that's why I believe that he is the leader that America not only needs, but God, I pray, still deserves. So please, Iowa, please vote in Vivek. I like Trump, I like DeSantis, but boy, do I love Vivek.